1947. An independent India at last. The British left her a paltry naval legacy. 4 anti-aircraft frigates, 2 anti-submarine frigates, and 12 minesweepers. There were no submarines and no aircraft carriers. Today, the Indian Navy boasts of 2 aircraft carriers, 1 nuclear-powered submarine, 14 conventional submarines, and an equally impressive number of state-of-the-art frigates, making it the 8th largest navy in the world. On 26th January 1950, the new republic dropped the prefix Royal from the Royal Indian Navy and the service became the Indian Navy. The Indian Navy continued to be headed by a British officer for 8 more years, till 22nd April 1958, when Vice Admiral R.D. Katari became the first Indian Chief of Naval Staff, making it a truly Indian service. Even as the Navy was acquiring an Indian character, a second dimension was given to her, a naval air arm. The future of the naval air arm was further secured with the commissioning of the former British aircraft carrier HMS Hercules as INS Vikrant into the Indian Navy on the 4th of March 1961. The 1965 Indo-Pak War highlighted the absence of the crucial third dimension of the Indian Navy, the submarine arm. Forays by Pakistani ships into Indian waters were effectively deflected by surface ships. In 1965, India and the USSR signed a package deal for the purchase of a Foxtrot-class submarine squadron, training of personnel in the Soviet Union, and technical assistance in setting up training and shore facilities at Visakhapatnam. India's first submarine, INS Kalvari, was commissioned on 20th December 1969 to give the Indian Navy a truly three-dimensional character. Around the same time, it was decided to build a general-purpose frigate at the Mazagon Docks, Bombay. While shopping for a design, the Indian Navy opted for the British Leanders, the latest in the market then, thus making India's first indigenous effort a major modernization attempt as well. INS Nilgiri, the first of the 6 Leanders, was launched on 23rd October 1968. It took almost 4 years to build. By July 1981, the Leander program underwent a sea change. So much so that the last 2 Leanders, each capable of carrying a Sea King helicopter on board, were a quantum jump ahead of the first Leander. Even as the Leander program was gathering momentum, the 1971 war broke out. The Indian Navy tasted its first blood when it sank PNS Ghazi, the Pakistani submarine, off Vishakhapatnam on the night of 3rd December and followed it up with an attack on the Karachi harbour the next day. So successful and devastating was this attack by her OSA-class missiles and a large task force that ever since then, the day, 4th December, is observed as Navy Day. The 1971 war also saw the Indian Navy suffer her first loss. INS Kukri was sunk by a Pakistani submarine. The same war also saw the first shadow of superpower intervention in the region, with the US 7th Fleet entering the Bay of Bengal. The fleet was headed by USS Enterprise, a nuclear-powered aircraft carrier. In 1973, while oil prices skyrocketed the world over, significant events were taking place which were to further shape India's policy of indigenization and modernization of her navy. India's Sagar Samrat, the ONGC rig, struck oil in Bombay High off the Bombay coast in the Arabian Sea. Soon this area was to become the oil bowl of the country. Simultaneously, the United Nations, at its 3rd Law of the Seas conference, created exclusive economic zones, adding to territorial responsibilities.
Only 10 years ago, we were getting about 1 million tons of oil per year from Bombay High. That figure has now surpassed 20 million tons. and there are at present over 60 platforms of various sizes and shapes about 120 to 140 kilometers away from our coast. The responsibility for protecting these, both in peace and war, has devolved on the Indian Navy. Secondly, as you know, in 1978, India by a presidential proclamation claimed an exclusive economic zone about 200 kilometers from its coastline. This meant that an area roughly equal to about 2 million square kilometers has been claimed by us as an exclusive economic zone for exploiting its resources, whether they are fisheries, seabed resources, oil, etc., exclusively for our own use. Again, the protection of these is a responsibility of the Indian Navy.
Thus arose the need for more sophisticated, large and indigenous warships like the Godavari class frigates, India's first indigenously designed and constructed frigates.
One of the lessons of the 1971 war was, it was for the second time only that surface-to-surface missiles were used in a war. And in a way it transformed naval warfare at sea. In those days we had only small missile boats which didn't have much endurance, which carried missiles. We realized that to be effective, we must have platforms which will be able to keep at sea for a long period and carry missiles. And hence the evolution of the original Leander class frigate into what we now call the Godavari class frigate. It is a ship which is basically on the Leander hull, but modified and stretched by us, but with a totally different weapon package.
The 125-meter-long Godavari frigate is basically a stretched and broad-beamed offshoot of the Leanders. It is the only ship of its size in the world which can carry 2 large Sea King helicopters on board, equipped with Soviet missiles, Italian anti-submarine torpedoes, guns and radars also from the Soviet Union, and Indian and Dutch command control systems. The Godavari is probably the most international ship in the world. The first Godavari class frigate, launched on 15th May 1983, was commissioned as INS Godavari on 10th December the same year. The ensuing period, however, saw a rapid deterioration of the environment in the Indian Ocean. Acquisition of new bases by superpowers, frequent movement of foreign warships in the area, and rapid modernization of naval fleets of our neighbors, which included the acquisition of harpoon missiles and other destructive weapons. To safeguard our interests, the Indian Navy began augmenting her submarine branch. It inducted 2 German-made Type 1500 hunter-killer submarines, said to be the most sophisticated in the world. 2 more are being built at the Mazagon Docks, Bombay, and will be followed by indigenously designed submarines. Another addition was the Kilo-class submarines with their unique teardrop hull. These were acquired from the Soviet Union in readiness for phasing out the earlier Foxtrot-class submarines. But the country's most significant acquisition in this field was that of INS Chakra, a nuclear-powered submarine also from the USSR. The surface fleet was further modernized with the induction of Soviet-built Kashin-class destroyers, the Durgs and the Veer class of missile boats. Arm was also brought up to date with the addition of VSTOL aircrafts, the Sea Harriers. They replaced the old Seahawks by 1983. The induction of HMS Hermes as INS Virat into the Indian Navy on 12th May 1987 further strengthened the naval air arm. Shortly before this, the old reliable INS Vikrant, India's first aircraft carrier, went in for a major refit and modernization at the Navy's own dockyard in Bombay. Over the years, this dockyard has equipped itself to carry out elaborate refits and repairs as it is doing now on the Vikrant. Along with Sea Harriers, sophisticated anti-submarine warfare helicopters, the Sea Kings of British make and Kamovs made in the Soviet Union were also inducted. But the quantum jump in anti-submarine warfare capability came with the acquisition of Tu-142, the long-range Soviet maritime aircraft known in the NATO as the Bear. But this new state-of-the-art equipment needed equally well-trained officers and men, hence such sophisticated simulators.
What we are trying to achieve at present is to try and improve the indigenous content in the ships that we are building in India. When we started in 1964 and the first ship was completed in 1972, I think the indigenous content was about 50 to 60%. We are now somewhere in the area of 85% indigenous content in the ships that we are constructing, and we hope to take it up in future ships to about 95%, leaving only a small amount of equipment which will have to be imported.
The turn of the century should well see the country acquire enough expertise to modernize indigenously and create a sophisticated and modern navy within its own dockyards.
करेंगे हम तेरे